this is the group that I work for. Our clinic is actually based out of southern Minnesota. We cover a wide area. We're a large group, and there's probably people in this room that talk to some of my partners more than I do. That's just the way we are. I'll get this right. Yeah, that's right, guys. So, PRRS control strategies. Here's what I really wanted to talk about. It's like, what is our goal in our practice area? And I could sum it up just like this, and I could probably actually stop after this slide. Our goal is to have systems in which we can make PRRS negative pigs on a consistent basis out of the sow farms. And then after we make them, we have to decide what we're going to do with them, because we put them in a very PRRS dense areas and they end up going PRRS positive. But that's the second side of the story. And we've got a lot of history of what we've gone through over the last 10 years and what we've learned. And our history is probably a lot like your history. I think back to that, that 8 to 10 year ago time frame, and nobody wanted to live with PRRS, and so we said we're getting rid of it. We're gonna fix PRRS. We're gonna depop the sow farms because we wanted to improve genetics, and at the same time, we can get rid of a lot of the other little bugs. And so, get rid of PRRS, get rid of mycoplasma, and get improved genetics. And within a few short years, we were just left with improved genetics. Most all those herds went back PRRS positive, and what was really disappointing, we didn't really understand things at the time, is most of those herds all went back mycopositive too. And that left us in kind of a unique situation of, okay, we spent a lot of money on this project. What did we learn out of it? And I think that's where we want to head to here. So really, we've got a current situation. We got kind of three different scenarios. One, we've got these sow farms that are truly in really good locations, and they're negative sow farms making negative pigs. And the transport cost of these systems is kind of high because they're in locations where there's not a lot of other pigs, but they're very consistent at what they're supposed to do. And that's make negative pigs every week and make about the same number of negative pigs every week. So really in these systems we focus heavily on biosecurity. And if I back up for a second, when we went through initially, you think back and put your head at 10 years ago, okay? And what we didn't know then that we do know now about the way PRRS moves around. When we depopped and repopped these sow farms, we really worked on sow farm biosecurity. We spent a lot of time with, how to get trucks to and away from sow farms, how to load and unload pigs, how to get people in and out of theirs. And I actually think we got pretty good at it. But it was very disappointing how fast those sow farms turned back positive to PRRS in spite of the good biosecurity. So you can look back and say, well, there was some good outcomes from that. The other situations where we've got positive sow farms, they're in not the greatest locations, okay, but they're built. They're going to stay where they are. So what do we do with them? And what are the strategies around these sow farms to try to make PRRS negative pigs? These are the type of sow farms that, if you look back over history, they're going to break once a year, every other year, maybe even up to twice a year. But in between those periods, they're good at making negative pigs, okay? And then during those time frames, what are we going to do with those pigs? Then the last situation is the sow farms that are just in terrible geographies. And sometimes, it's like, I'm not sure we completely understand why they're so bad, but usually there's a fairly high density of pigs around them. These farms break 2 to 3 times a year. They do not and will not stay PRRS negative. And what's really sad is rarely the same virus. You do the work, you sequence the virus, and lo and behold, it's another virus. Well, where'd this one come from? So, talking about regional control, it's like, well, okay, Company B has a nursery 3/4 of a mile away, and they put that virus in that nursery, and it took about 4 weeks, and it was in the sow farm, or that situation. And the only thing left for these is we've gone ahead and filtered them, because we cannot keep them negative long enough to make negative pigs in any sort of streak. And we'll go through these sow farms. So basically these were just shut down, filtered, and now they're making negative pigs. But the goal of all the systems really is to make a negative pig. And we found out the value of a positive pig when the feeder pig or the Eisenmenger market went to heck, right, a couple of years ago. I mean, a PRRS negative pig was hardly worth the transportation cost if somebody wanted to buy them. A PRRS positive pig, you literally couldn't give away during that time frame. And we've all tried to raise them, so we know more than just buying them. So to me, that kind of takes us to our next step. We've got these 3 different sow farms, okay, these 3 different strategies, and then now, what are we going to do with them? How are we going to feed them their gilts? And that's the other thing that we really broke down over the last 10 years and said, every sow farm has a GDU. So you have to have your own GDU, and we have to put things together to make them work. I would say that actually, Randy in the back there, this is a line from you probably right here. It's like, you know, you guys sit there and you look at PRRS and you look at PRRS and you look at PRRS. And I mean, for goodness sakes, don't forget about all those little bugs, because I bet every one of us in the room has a flow of pigs that's PRRS negative that doesn't behave very well. And we're not making as much money on that flow as we should. And that's where we probably got in a situation where we forgot about some of this little bug control. So, it is important that we monitor these and understand what's going, expose things early to them, get them recovered, and so get them into the sow farm that they actually match. The point here on mycoplasma in these GDUs, this is not just for this specific GDUs, but in general. I could probably talk for a long time on mycoplasma because we learned the hard way. As we repopped all those sow farms, we made negative nucleus and negative multiplication. And where would you put multiplication and that sort of thing? You're going to put them way out where there's no pigs, right? And so they've stayed PRRS negative, they stayed myco-negative. And now you take those replacement gilts, and at that time you said, hey, we got a myco-negative, PRRS negative gilt, we'll take that select weight gilt and we'll just flow it into these sow farms that turned what? Myco-positive, PRRS positive. And that was an absolute recipe from disaster for PRRS, but also it was a huge recipe for disaster for mycoplasma. You look at mycoplasma control overall, and you have to ask me, what is the most important component? I would say it's the gilt developer unit, and preparing that gilt and getting her exposed very early in life, letting her see mycoplasma early, recover that, and shed very little mycoplasma as the time she enters the sow farm. The load that pig carries off the sow farm for mycoplasma clearly dictates how he's going to behave in the grow finish. And that to me is regardless of the medication program or the vaccination program. And so we focus heavily on getting those gilts exposed and recovered to mycoplasma. We do not want to put mycoplasma in multiplication. We still want mycoplasma to be multiplication negative, so we can actually make that decision as we roll some farms and get them filtered and turn them back myco-negative again. And then obviously in this situation where we have a PRRS negative farm in a great area and they have their own GDU, we would not put PRRS vaccine obviously in that GDU. Then we got our GDUs for the PRRS positive sow farm. And this is where you kind of stand up here and you put the target on your back, but this is what we do, okay? And I'm not saying this is what you guys do. This talk was designed to tell you what we're doing, okay? And so what we do for those, we go in there and we find the virus that's infecting that sow farm, and we get those gilts prepared to enter that sow farm. And so that sow farm has virus 1. Virus 1 gets injected into those gilts at 50 pounds. They recover from that, and by the time they're ready to go back into the sow farm, at least they're PCR negative. And I guess the ultimate test is when we monitor that flow, do those pigs stay negative? And the only thing that I can say is, most of the time those pigs stay negative for virus 1. Not always, but most of the time when we follow them out. Now, we do continue to inject those animals with ATP, and that's a whole separate discussion. Why would you give them field virus, and why would you follow up with ATP? And it's an evolving process, but when we look at those sow farms and they go PRRS virus positive, and we do nothing with them, we're awesome about shutting them down and making them negative again, right? We can all do that. Everybody in the room has shut down lots and lots of farms and made them PRRS negative. The problem is we can't keep them that way. And so what we've decided to do on those farms in locations where we know they're going to see virus is we're going to give them that specific virus in the gilt developer, get them negative, and roll them in. We're going to use ATP because we use ATP in the sow farm, so we want them to see ATP in the gilt developers. And a lot of those pigs, when we're making the negative pig then, and they're going to go into pig dense area, that pig is also going to receive some ATP. Negative farms in good geography, same deal there. We're not going to use PRRS virus on that farm. We're going to keep them negative, and we're going to make negative pigs and decide what to do with them. The sow farms that are positive, that we went through the GDU and we gave them their specific virus, they're managed that way because we've talked about it. We expect them to break at least once a year, and they do. And when they do, now we have to decide what to do with them. And what we've been doing with them is that when they break, we go in and we blanket the farm with ATP. Some of those farms are still on a multiple times a year ATP program where we just go in and inject those sows. And if you think back over your history and my history, I remember back when we used to give the sow farms a lot of ATP, and we would break with PRRS and we'd have 100 aborts, and we would say vaccine failed. Get it out of there. And so we did. We took them out of there. And a lot of those we removed the ATP. And then over time, I guess you didn't want to hear my talk. Over time, all those herds broke again, and they broke hard with PRRS, and then you sit down and you ask yourself, okay, what was the strategy there? And then what was the expectation of vaccine? And I think we had the wrong expectation for vaccine. And we had the wrong expectation of how we wanted to manage control in those farms where we were consistently breaking with PRRS.
Hey, Mike, real quick, maybe just a point of clarification for those maybe who aren't veterinarians in here, what ATP is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, that's a good point, Chris. ATP is the modified live virus, vaccine virus, that actually BI sells and we use. So it's a method that we would use in control. It's a live vaccine, but it's designed to help control PRRS. How many of you guys in the room have used ATP before? Quite a few. Okay.
Are you distinguishing it from the MLB?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have used ATP probably for the last, 3 to 5 years almost exclusively. And now you can ask why. And I'm not sure we have a lot of good science on why. But I would say this, that we just got done doing a trial where we were comparing ATP with MLV in the grow finish side. And that was the main thing because we thought we wanted to be at ATP in the grow finish side. And so if we're going to be ATP in the grow finish side, we want to have that back on use it on the south side. And when we did the preliminary information off that trial is that there's really no difference between the two in grow finish in our hands, in our geography, under our situation. So, that's a good point too. It's like everything we measure and talk about, that's what we see in our area after what we measure.
Hey, Mike, just a point of clarification. This is a little bit different maybe than what I've heard you and some of your colleagues say in the past. So you're saying if you get a new virus introduced, you don't do LVI right away, you're using ATP.
It's some of both right now, Chris. Yep. And a lot. It's really interesting when you watch these sow farms, you monitor these sow farms that have seen live virus exposure in the GDU. Then they go in and they become sows in the sow farm. And, we do a lot of monitoring like you guys probably do in the sow farms. And all of a sudden you go in there and you'll be monitoring these wean pigs and it's all of a sudden you find a virus. Or you find a virus in a sick sow. And it's like you sequence that virus and it's like, it's different. It's actually a fair bit different than the virus that you gave back in the GDU. And you just, what do? You kind of pull up your pants and hold on because here we go. It's going to be a bad ride. And then all of a sudden, nothing happens. I mean, like nothing. It goes away. And so I think that the sow farms are occasionally, the sow farms that are exposed, occasionally get viruses bounced on top of them. And if you weren't monitoring, you don't know it. But if you are monitoring, you'll see them bouncing and they just go away. And so, good thing, we dodged the bullet. But that being said, where was I going? I mean, no, let's stop here for a second. Okay, I was talking.
So probably the question is, Mike, maybe what you're saying then is, you're saying on the ones where there's no clinical signs that you find virus, you may think about just using ATP versus a clinical outbreak?
That's right, yeah. And so the route that I was going down is that when we find these like non-important viruses, we'll just go in there and we'll booster the farm with ATP. And on any farm where the exposure virus is similar to ATP, we'll just use that ATP instead of the live virus exposure. When we go in and we all of a sudden get blitzed by a brand new virus that just kicks our ass, okay? I mean, it's like you would never know that you had any protection there at all. Then a lot of times we'll take that virus and it replaces the gilt developer virus, and then the sow farms get re-injected with that live virus exposure. So there's not one system, and there's probably not one system because you always aren't sure exactly what the right answer is. But in these farms that you know are going to get hit with PRRS, we cannot have them PRRS negative. And so what we've chose to do at this point is give them live virus in the gilt developer and follow that up with ATP in the sow farm. And then there's the filtered sow farms. This is easy too. It's like you get them filtered, you roll them negative, and you keep them negative. You spend a lot more time talking about biosecurity than you talk about what vaccine you're going to use. Pigs. That's the GDUs, that's the sows, and then what do we do with the pigs? It's all about making that consistent supply of PRRS negative pigs. So if we have PRRS negative pigs going into a poor geography, then we vaccinate them before they go into entry. We vaccinate them with, once again, we use ATP. What defines a poor geography for grow finish? It's where all the corn is, it's where all the pigs are, it's where all the markets are, it's where everything is. And I would say as a practice, I look at, it's still kind of like the 80-20 rule. We probably make 80% of the pigs that I see on a daily basis PRRS negative to start with at weaning. The mission is, what do we do with them now that we've made them PRRS negative when they got to go into areas that we know they are going to see PRRS? And that's where vaccine comes into place. So, topics involved with PRRS control around, the next one I was going to talk about was about piglet vaccination. What is our strategy on these pigs? Okay? Our strategy has been that if we're going to make them negative, that's for sure. We're going to vaccinate them if they go into a bad area. And then, how did we come up with that strategy? That's just like the same way you guys do it, right? You work with your clients and you do the trials with them. You get the information that derives you, and that becomes your belief, okay? And so that's where I have my beliefs, and I'm sure that's how you guys develop your beliefs, from looking at your own data. And what we do is we vaccinate them. We say, okay, what's going to happen to those pigs? And when we've done surveys out in grow finish in our pig dense areas, which would be for us, it would be southern Minnesota, it would be northwest Iowa, it would be north central Iowa, it would be central Iowa, and that's kind of the area where most of our pigs go into, and they're very pig dense areas. And I mean, maybe not near as pig dense as some of the areas down here that you guys have to deal with. But for us, they're very pig dense, meaning in one square mile, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 finishers of about 4,000 head, and there might be 3 different companies putting pigs in that geography. And when we sample those areas very consistently, if we know we put in negative pigs, and we're going to look at the outcome before they go to market, we'll lose 50% or more of those groups on a consistent basis, meaning they turned field virus positive because we bled them, or sometime during that we sent tissues off the lab, or we sequenced them, and it's a different virus. So they went positive to the virus that's floating around that neighborhood. What do we know about that? We know this is a very true statement for us, that if we vaccinate those pigs, they perform better than non-vaccinated pigs when they get exposed to field virus. We also know that if you have a vaccinated pig and a non-vaccinated pig, and he doesn't get exposed to field virus, you're out the money you invested in that pig. And so to me, it's the way we look at it, it's all about what was your return, right? And so when we looked at all these different trials, I looked at them before I came here, and it's like they weren't consistent in their outcome of what they did, whether they lowered mortality, whether the value showed up in a decrease in no values or culls, whether there was any difference in average daily gain, or whether they changed feed conversion. But when you looked at all those together on the trials that we've done, there's always been a difference. When you when you take positive pigs and you vaccinate them, you put him out in the real world, he sees real PRRS, and you look at the difference in the outcome between the pigs that didn't see real PRRS and didn't get vaccine. So the key point here, I think, is really in deciding what percent of your sites go positive. So for the way I look at it, it's like, okay, so I've got these sites that I'm vaccinating, and it costs me this much to vaccinate them. And if I don't get any real PRRS virus, I've really taken that money and I've thrown it away. It did me no good. Then I take this other percentage of pigs that they go out in the real world, I've put the money in them, I vaccinate them, they see real virus, now what's going to happen to them? Well, I know they're going to perform this much better, but does that outweigh the number of pigs that are not going to see PRRS virus? And so when I look at our practice area, we've got areas where we don't vaccinate them. We make them negative and we keep them negative and they do really well. There's other areas, like when they go south for us, when we vaccinate them, we know that there's a 50% chance of them going positive, and so now it becomes that easy math for us. Those pigs are going to get vaccinated, and that's how we handle them. When do we vaccinate them? We vaccinate them shortly after weaning as possible, because even in our wean to finish barns, and we look at the time frame when they go positive, sometimes it happens way faster than we want, and we want to get at least 4 weeks between when we vaccinated them and when they see real virus. And so we try to get them vaccinated just as soon as possible after they enter the nursery or the wean to finish barn. Biosecurity. We've talked a lot about this already, and the point I want to make here is really centered around grow-finish biosecurity and the debate of when we get 50% of the sites that pick up field virus, did it blow in or did it track in? Does it matter? What can we do about it? Okay? And so, to be totally honest, when I'm talking to grow-finish, I spend a lot less time talking about aerosol transmission. Why? Because it's out of their control. And number two, why is the other reason? Because they really do a crappy job of biosecurity day in and day out. When I look at sow farms and kind of what we talked about earlier, what we've taught them, right? You know, how to get in and out of a sow farm. You know, we have the bench where you come in and you put your shoes on one side of the bench, you swing your feet over, and now you enter another little area even before you get in the shower. Then we shower through, we wash our body, we change our clothes, and we go in. Life is good. We've got ways to get dry supplies in. We have sit-out rooms that all the dry supplies come to the room. They sit out, and they get a downtime before they enter the sow farm. You know, in the past, a lot of them first for us went up as fumigation rooms where we would aerosolize them with disinfectant, and kind of got away from that. We've kind of gone back to, okay, these supplies are going to go in this room and they're going to sit where it's warm and dry for 2 days, and then they can enter the sow farm. So I don't know what you guys have done, if you guys stuck with the disinfectant or not, but they didn't seem to like that very well. And then how to get cool supplies in. They're all come in with the double packs, right? Where you open up the box, you've got a double pack, the guy reaches in, takes the inside part of the box that's clean, pulls that through into the sow farm, and the outside box gets shuffled away and goes away. Very effective at bringing in cool supplies into a sow farm. So, I mean, that's the message. Sow farms, good biosecurity, good rules. I look at wean to finish and nursery in our area, and it's like, it's pretty good. It's better. It's not as good as sow farms, but it's not bad. A lot of them have showers. A lot of them have limited exits. Feel pretty good about those, although not as good about getting supplies in and out of them. Then we get to the finishers, and this is where it's like, we've really struggled with biosecurity on finishers. And it's just like, when you're losing 50% of your finishers, and they're only there for 4 months, it's not like a sow farm where they have to live in that same building for the next 20 years, and then they break how many times a year? they're in there for 4 months and they break half the time. It's like, I think we still have to look at us and say, okay, what is our responsibility there? And you look at them and they're smaller sites. A lot of them are the finisher sites or the older sites. Because I would say over the last, I look at over the last 5 years that we built way more wean to finish barns than finishing barns. And so if you look at our finishing barns in general, they're kind of from an older generation. They don't have showers. There's usually no connecting hallway, so you're always walking in or out here. To be totally honest, a lot of them don't even have a sink in there. And so it's like, what do you do with these on a daily basis? And so what we said, at least, maybe I'd do it better on this slide, is what we said, at least we're going to look at this site as its own site. And you almost draw a ring around that site and you say, I'm going to do everything in my power not to bring PRRS inside that ring. And so you might actually make that ring more like right here, because that's where they're going to be moving around. And so when we come to a site, we're going to park not in this area where we got foot traffic. We're going to park down here. We are going to come out of the truck and we're going to put on a pair of blue booties and we're going to walk into the clean zone. And so I feel relatively good that when I go to those sites, I'm not bringing something with me to that site. We'll put on farm-specific boots and coveralls. We'll do what we need to do, and then when we leave, the top layer of plastic boots stays at the site, and the blue booties go onto a boot stake that's staked down here, and they're gotten rid of. So we're not taking them with us. Then the other thing, we all have, everybody has wipes that you wipe your hands down and wipe your face off. You can't shower. So, you just sit back and think about that. What are the things that we can do to decrease the rate from 50% to a lower number? And then the last thing in that circle there is the dead boxes. What the heck do we do with the dead box? We do have some companies that do a lot of composting in our area, and we have other companies that do zero. So how are we going to get deads from that site? So the most important thing is to get that dead box away from the farm itself and set rules that are going to happen when you and me aren't watching that site. Okay? So the challenge is, if you got a dead box that's very close and you got a dead cart that comes out of the barn and he has to go from me to Dave Gherkin back there with a dead on his cart, is he going to run it down there and dump it at the dead box and come back, or is he going to unhook it so the dead cart doesn't leave the barn and then take something and drag it down there? Well, realistically, the answer is no. He's going to do whatever easiest on a daily basis. And that's even if he knows his job's at risk, to be totally honest. I mean, you think about that on a day like today, you've got 5 deads to drag out, it's 100 degrees, you're busting your butt. You're going to do it in the most easy way you can to get it down there. And so we have to design a system that it's easier to do the right thing. Okay? So it's easier to do the right thing when you just throw the pigs out of the barn and you make the dead box far enough away that the only way that they're going to get there is by not having the cart go back in the barn and back and forth from the dead box. But I mean, every system is different. I mean, I just ask you to think through that and make sure that when we're talking about grow finish, we're thinking about how to make those sites biosecure. The other thing that is, like, we tried to educate them and teach them and say, okay, where are these viruses, where are these pathogens on these grow finish sites? And so we actually did team up with BI last winter, and we said, let's just swab. Let's just go out and swab bunches of sites. So we sent people out, and we're going to say, let's find the bugs on those grow finish sites. And what we did is we did the Swifter method, where we have the Swifter pad that comes from your kitchen, really. I hope all of you have learned that rule, that you never take something from the house to the pig barn and expect to bring it back. That includes your wife's camera or anything else, because they smell pigs. So we liquefy the surface, we swab up the material. That was loading chutes, dead box areas. That's snow for you guys down here. And you take the material, put it in a vial, and send it off for PCR. And we did have a positive control, just to prove that we could find a virus. And what we found was really interesting. I mean, what we found was there was a lot of sites that we placed PRRS negative pigs there. We did not think they were positive at the time, but we did find PRRS virus in the office and on the dead box. So my guess is it's going to get into those sites. Now, in converse, we did find where we placed positive pigs, there was a lot of PRRS in non-pig areas on those sites. And so if you think about that, we got people traveling around all the time. They're going to PRRS positive pigs, even if they're not in the pigs, they're going to see PRRS virus. And how often have you been at a site where it's like you're just at a site and all of a sudden the door opens up and here comes Supervisor Tom. It's like, this isn't your site. Oh, I'm just here to pick up some vaccine I left in his refrigerator here. I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to head down to this F44. It's like, oh, really? You know, and so wasn't in the pigs, didn't have anything to worry about. And so therefore, if he didn't have his blue booties on, getting out of his truck and shedding those blue booties before he went to the next site, is he going to transmit PRRS? More than likely. The other thing that we found was TGE. And last winter was a bad TGE winter for us. It survived well in the winter, and I think we did a great job of moving it around. And we did find TGE, PCR positive, okay, on sites that I didn't think there was TGE there. But we didn't find it in the non-pig areas. We found it in the office, on the office floor. And you know, we never did get to the point where we said, okay, was that TGE alive or dead? Should we do a bioassay on it? We never did get that done, to be honest. We'd like to do that, and probably going to look on doing that more of this next winter. But it was a great educational piece because it really showed the service guys that, you know, there's a lot of pathogens in the office floor, on the dead box, and in the chute. And if we're not managing that correctly, we're going to move it around. And are we part of that 50% problem? And I'd say the answer is absolutely yes. Trucks, it's really interesting to hear the new program with you guys in Iowa State. And a lot of our clients are signing up for that. And we're actually very excited about it because, you know, I look back and it's like you almost look at this and you say, it's done. We put this one to bed. We went back there and we upgraded the truck wash and we did a lot of monitoring and we put in the dry bays and we're good. Then you think about that and it's like, I was thinking back there, I thought, when was the last time I've been in the truck wash? And it's like, it's been a while. And so it's like all of a sudden it's like, nothing's ever over. You got to go back and make sure that we're right. But I think that we have good protocols here and good procedures, but it's okay, is it actually working like we think it's actually working? And then same thing around that is the protocols for how we get pigs off a sow farm, how we get them loaded onto the chute at the wean to finish barn, and how do we get that truck back to the sow farm again. And that's another one that it's really always interesting. There's a couple interesting things you can always do. Number one, just go out early in the morning and say, I'm going to be at the farm when they're loading pigs. Because the protocol is that, you know, it's like the sow farm people, this is their line, and they must stop here. From that point, someone else takes over, and there's no crossover. And then all of a sudden, you get to the farm early in the morning, and it's like, that's not exactly what's happening there. And so, you know, the thought process of what actually happens and what you think happens are often different. And so it really does pay big dividends. The other interesting one that I was going to throw in there was it's always interesting to go out early on a Monday morning, real early on a Monday morning, and just say, okay, how many finishing sites can I get to in this morning? Because I want to see if they're out of feed. And that's another one that's very interesting if you actually go out and take a look. Different topic. Testing. We all test the crap out of these pigs, but they're for good reason. And I'm going to be very interested to hear Jeff's rope talk because we're definitely moving down that road. But just if you think about it, I mean, we've got gilts that are in the developers and we're going to get them into the sow farm, right? So what do we do first? Well, we're going to make sure the truck's okay, but we're going to go out and we're going to test them before they leave. So we test them with PCR and we test them with ELISA. They test negative. We put them on a truck. We move them into the gilt developer. Well, we've been burned enough that 2 days after they got the developer, somehow they picked up PRRS. Was that on the truck? Was that on the truck ride or whatever? So now, if it's a multiplier farm, they get 100% tested 2 days after they come into that on-sow farm isolation. And then, before we release them into the sow farm, we test them again 3 weeks later. That's with the ELISA and PCR. And so, we're now switching over because, like, You know, it's like, it's funny. We have these rules for multiplication. It's the right thing to do, but now, well, we're not going to really do that for commercial, are we? And so we don't. And now I think the rope testing, we're going to now, the protocol state that instead of that 2 days after arrival, 100% bleed, we're going to go in there and we're going to hang ropes. And we're going to dramatically increase our sample size and without physically testing each one of those animals. Because you guys have been there too, that's also a safety issue. If you ever tried to bleed, tell somebody, you got to go in there, and there's 130 gilts in there, and you got to go snare every single one of them. There's always about 4 crazies in there that are going to kill somebody. And then, if you ever done that with a bunch of replacement boars, that's a way to die. But on all the flows, we do test the wean pigs. We call it our wean pig audit. All the systems do it. And they either test basically 10 pigs every week or about 30 pigs every month, or there's some kind of varieties around that. But the bottom line is we get a pretty good feel of what that farm has done, history over time of making negative pigs. Now, I understand completely that if you say that I'm doing 10 pigs every week or 30 pigs every month, do I really know if I'm making negative pigs? And the answer is no. You really don't know unless you follow those flows out and put them in a situation where what really works well is they put them in a continuous flow type nursery, and you go to that nursery and you monitor that nursery and you look for virus. And if you find virus there and you sequence it, does it match what we think the sow farm had clear back in the GDU? But it's amazing how many of those sow farms exposed in that program have the ability to make negative pigs on this test for a long period of time. And actually, I believe that to be true because when we go out and we do these surveys in grow finish and we find that 50% of the finishing sites are now positive for PRRS virus, how often is that virus the same virus that we put in the GDU? Almost never. So I think that we can very effectively make negative pigs. And then there's area control. The one in Minnesota that we have obviously is the north of 212. I mean, there's areas that there should be PRRS and there's areas that there just should not be PRRS. And I think we're finally getting to that realization, and then how do we get the PRRS out of there? And there's some pain here because, I mean, there's sites up here right now that for our clients, they have a gilt developer which they do serum exposure in. Why is it up there? Well, it was one of their barns that was in a good area that they think they're not going to get infected. So now they got to go shut that down and get it out of that line if they're going to comply with the program. Filtration, just quickly on this, it's one of our methods once again that it's one of the tools in the toolbox to make PRRS negative pigs on a consistent basis from farms that we could not control it any other way. So really, in reality, the bore studs are done. And we don't have to go through this. I mean, we all know what the cost is. You've been through it. You have your number. And we talked about this. Really, it's easy to get PRRS off a farm. The challenge has been keeping it off the farm and keeping negative. And now with all the studies that have been done, we're way more in tune. We would have never did what we did 10 years ago if we knew how mycoplasma and PRRS virus really moves around the countryside. And this is kind of where we're at today. We have 47 of our clients under filtration, and it's gradually increased by year. Of course, except 2009. You can only imagine why there was nothing much done then, right? As there was no money in the bank. 2010, we're off and rolling again, and it's highly prioritized to farms that have really no other good method of control for making negative pigs. And you can kind of see how it works. Basically, all the air gets filtered coming in the farm. The filters are in the attic.
Mike, how many of those are sow farms and how many are bore studs?
When I look up at this list, Chris, these are a lot of bore studs up here, and these are virtually all sow farms down here. So I would say in general, in our geography, most of the bore studs got done and are done, and they're going to stay that way. And then as we're looking at that technology for these farms that we can't stay negative, all these have been sow farms. And even that, Chris, to be totally honest, of this list, there's a lot of different ways to get it done. I really wasn't going to get heavy into that, but partial filtration, full filtration, bailout systems, and so some of these farms are in areas that they have never had a PRRS break in the summer, and so they went to partial filtration. And others have got PRRS, when you look at when they've had their breaks, it's all year. It's never really consistent on the time frame, and so they went to full filtration. And then this is what it would look like if we had to have one of those farms under full filtration. where we're putting this accordion-shaped filter bank out in front of the cool cell that's behind here. So if we couldn't get all the air in through the ceiling, it wasn't built that way, that's the way the air would come in the wintertime. And then when it gets to be summertime and we got to pull air in through the cool cell, then it would have to come through these filters first and then on into the farm. I would never filter a farm that didn't fully understand biosecurity, and you feel very confident that they've got that down, obviously. There's another attic filter. Another attic filter. But some of the things that have to be done besides just filtering the air is getting these, we still have to bring in and out animals, right? So we got gilts coming in, we got cull sows going out, and we got wean pigs going out from every day to 2 or 3 times a week. And so a lot of places they have to build a special area where the animals go in, the doors get shut, the animals leave, you evacuate the air, you start over again. But it's really not that complicated to do.
Mike, when you say partial filtration, are you really talking full filtration part of the year?
Yes, exactly. So on a farm like that is that they'll seal up the farm and they'll put the filters above the ceiling inlets. And the goal is obviously that you can get to a certain outside temperature before you can no longer suck air into the farm through that method. And then hopefully at that point it is 75 degrees outside, 70, 75 degrees, and you bypass the filters, you open up the cool cell, and now the unfiltered air is coming in through the cool cell of the farm. It's a risk. Obviously it's cheaper. And to me it's all about risk management. The thing that I never do with people is say, you filter a sow farm, you're done, you're not going to get PRRS. You're still going to get PRRS, you're just not going to get it near as often. So we build these rooms where we get pigs in, close them down, lock them up, and then get them back out. The other thing is that most of the farms that have done this have went from basically, well, count them. 10 exits. I can throw a dead out this door. I can cull sows come in this door. Wean pigs go out this door. That kind of all goes away, and it's like this is the door. Everything goes in and out of this door. Then the big fans, they've been a problem, so they put on, now we're coming into these windsocks that when the fan's on, it blows out, and when they're off, they collapse down and prevent backflow of air in through the inside shutters. And really, this isn't to really go into that much detail, it's just to show what the darn things cost, right? And so in our area, if we're going to do the better filter, the L9s, we're going to get, and you look at this whole deal over 10 years with what we're assuming we have to replace a filter, you're going to get a couple bucks a pig in there. If you can get it all through the ceiling the way that's built and you can use L9s, maybe it's $1.50 a pig. If you can use the L6s and you get it all through the ceiling, maybe you're under $1. Okay, but somewhere you're between $1 and $2 a pig, ongoing cost. The only thing we don't know is how long the filters are going to last. All these were kind of initialies and said they're going to last 3 years. Now, as we're getting these filter trailers built where you go in there, you pull out the filter, you place in the trailer, and you measure how much air can suck through it, it looks like we're going to get way more than 3 years out of them. So maybe the cost will be a little bit less than that. But still, it fits into the whole overall strategy of we've got to make PRRS negative pigs. We firmly believe that. It's just what do we do with them? And this is some of the results that Darwin actually shared with me. On 38 of the farms, on the previous 5 years before filtration, they had 51 breaks or 34% a year. After that, on those same farms that were partial, they went to 8%. And on the 100%, we still had 2 breaks. So, maybe it's 4%. I don't know what that number is going to be. It depends. But it's not going to be 0. But it's going to be less. So, conclusions for us is that we have a lot of different programs, and one size doesn't fit all. It's all custom designed. But if you just step back away from that for a second, it's like, how are we really going to control PRRS? How are we going to make negative pigs? And just as importantly, how do we develop a gilt developer system that not only fits well with PRRS, but fits for all the little bugs besides? So when we make a pig and send it out in the flow, it's going to perform well. And when we get good and we can make these negative pigs, and we got to send them into central Iowa, what are we going to do with them? Today, we're going to give them PRRS vaccine. And if we send them up north, we're not going to give them PRRS vaccine. And that's our strategy. And then obviously what we talked a lot about is that we're really going to continue to try to upgrade these guys that are out in the grow finish world, on the finish world I should say, and get them way more in tune on biosecurity than they are today.